Okay, so today's May 23, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. And it looks like the agenda today, I posted a question about how to choose comrades in a time of collapse. Is it something to seek out actively, or does it happen naturally, or do a bit of both? For me, living in like cities where people are in collapse denial, it's difficult to find or know how to search or even look for physical comrades. I know online it's much easier and actually beneficial, but finding real people is a bit harder. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it doesn't hurt to actually go out and find people. Just go out to places where people of the same mindset might hang out. But the best way of all to actually meet up with people is semi-passively, but from the intersubjectivity synchronicity telephone. So if you start if you don't actively seek out other people, but you work on yourself and just on the work we're doing, then you will find people that will kind of manifest. If you get to a certain stage, you see a certain stage of work on yourself will give you a kind of an aura where people will automatically come over and speak to you and stuff. So if you're thinking, I mean, if you're a guy, I'll tell you just a tip for young guys is the biggest aphrodisiac, I suppose, is like power and success and money, but that's not really the ultimate biggest. The biggest aphrodisiac for a woman, and you really want to meet a woman, is if you're just happy and content in yourself. If you're healthy and happy and utterly content in yourself and just enjoying life, women will go for that, like a beeline, and then make your life miserable for the rest of your life if they can. But if you're just happy and content in yourself, you give out kind of pheromones and serotonin and stuff, and it's like a moth to the flame for the opposite sex, and sometimes both sexes too. So one of the things that happen is, particularly if you meditate and get a sense of presence in this kind of work, if you kind of exude sattva, then people will come up to you, or even strangers, just in the street, is possible. They'll come up to you and they very attracted. They can see there's something special about you, but they don't know what. So they won't know what question to ask. They want to ask is, what is it about you that what secret have you got? But they don't have the language to ask. But other people that are into this work, you will basically contact them just through the grapevine. So you see like-minded people, like I was disappointed with Alison McDowell because she's so obviously on the same wavelength as us. So it was sad that she didn't think so. But in general, those people will just come out of the woodwork. It's remarkable how we actually connect. I actually had a business partner, and I was partners with him for, we had a shared project and stuff, and it was like 3 years into our business partnership before, he came out with this entirely other side of him, which I had no clue about, and it was all about Sri Ramakrishna, and I had a lot of interest in that kind of thing. So we had a huge shared existence on this other plane, and we realized then that basically we kind of got into business as an excuse because of this other connection that we had that neither of us knew for years. So after we knew that, then we knew straight away that was the connection. We knew we had some hidden bond, but we didn't know what it was until one day we both surprised each other that we had this huge relationship with Sri Ramakrishna. So Yeah, so that's the kind of thing I mean, is people will gravitate, and you shouldn't. Yeah, you need a community. You need a community of like-minded people, but you if you just go running around trying to find one, you probably won't find success. It doesn't seem to work if you try and force it. It's better to just kind of be passive, and just people will connect, um, just as you go. You can't. So Sri Ramakrishna said this was about. He mentioned it as like hemp smokers. He said like two hemp smokers, basically ganja smokers, pot smokers. He, he said that basically they can spot each other across a crowded room. They just know, that guy also smokes bong in the quiet. And it was kind of a joke to Bengalis and stuff, because pot smokers are kind of outsiders. But he said it like kind of like thieves and pot smokers. They can see each other across a crowded room. They don't even have to talk, and it gets to be that way. Eventually, you get kind of this kind of work gets under you in your pores, and you start to exude it. So is that an explanation for it?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think that, yeah, working on the self is definitely important. I think throughout this time, or maybe recently, because I rewatched the video after, um, where you came out about abrupt climate change. Like you made the shift from your what was it, no escape, or escape, to the no escape series, and you, in that video, you talked about choosing your comrades wisely, and embedded in the comments there was a link to Canadian Prepper, where they asked him a question: if this scenario happened, what would you do? And it was, well, the scenario was, if there's a homeless person and a few buddies was coming along, um, how would you react if they asked you for food? And a lot of them, well, it seemed like they just wanted to kill those people who just, or they wouldn't
Yeah, that
help.
yeah, it's good you brought that up. I remember that very well. So that really horrified me, because those guys are kind of standard prepper mindset, and it's good you brought it up, because those guys you want to avoid. They
Right, yeah.
or I mean, you can associate with them, but don't ever don't ever get tight with those guys, because those guys have got a bit of a reckoning coming. You see, that little survey that the Canadian prepper guy did, it shocked even him, because here all these guys, he's kind of a mutualist kind of guy, but bit kind of libertarian, right? But in that survey of like he's got a lot of followers. There are hundreds of people, and then a good like quarter of those people said that if somebody came round to their house that looked a little dodgy and was like maybe eyeing up their daughter, about a quarter of the people responded that they would rack the slide, pull the safety off, and stick a gun in the guy's faces and say, "Get lost." But what really was shocking was 10% said they would give the guy food, but poison it with something like strychnine to kill the guy off, to make sure he didn't come back. And it's sort of like, wow, if that's how you react in an apocalypse, you're gone. Because there's no, he analyzed all those different responses, and his response was, that's not a very good idea, because the grid might come back up, basically society might restore itself, and then somebody might come around, accuse you of murder. But you see, when you get, in most collapse scenarios, like say Sarajevo, something like that, you still have communications between people, and there's still community. In fact, there's a lot more. In Sarajevo, they all became mutualists. But you're not going to be in suburbia with all your pals, and the guys on the left and the guys on the right of you are your pals, and you're going to defend your turf. It ain't like that, man. You go and poison some guy, then basically you'll have 200 guys coming around there with much bigger weapons than you, and they'll take you out, and you'll deserve it. So the mere fact that those guys think that way, like, I mean, anarchist mutualists, if you killed off a guy who you know, there's nobody who doesn't have networks and people that care about them and stuff, and it's like, you know, nobody's, even a homeless guy has guys that look out for him. So if you take out a guy with strychnine in the food, whoa, dudes, anarchists alone would come and find you and eliminate you. It's basically, it means that 10% of those people, if they got into their dream scenario, would be wiped out. The other guys that, like, you know, rack and load and stuff, yeah, that's okay. But what they're missing by sending people away that way is they're going to need them. So, you know, you must, they think it's all one way, and they're all sovereign individuals, and they, you know, self-reliance. They've all read Self-Reliance. Who wrote Self-Reliance again? I can't remember that. But anyway, he's big on the libertarian right. Who is it? Who wrote Self-Reliance?
I forget. Let me see. Oh, Ralph Waldo Emerson?
Yeah, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Yeah. So they all like him and stuff. And then they all think that, you know, their home is their castle, and, you know, but they all have this mindset that I'm okay, screw you. And like, well, that's not a good mindset right there, because you're going to need something. You know, you're going to get sick. You're going to need a tooth pulled. You're going to need your hair cut. It's like, guys, you can't think that way. That you're far better off in a university. If a hurricane comes through or something, you need skills. Everybody's got skills. You see, if you look at the Journal of a Plague Year, Daniel Defoe's Journal of a Plague Year, that is a very good book to read, because it is in a kind of a plague collapse in London, and it's for reals. So he goes through these three guys that did very well in the collapse. They were in London, and they survived very well. And the reason they survived was they had one guy who was old but kind of lame, but he had some money and resources. And then there was one guy who had no money, but he had a lot of skills, and he was very able. And then the third guy, he also had some unique characteristics. And so the three of them said, you know, we'll hook up together. This guy shares the money. This guy gives all the skills. And, you know, they all had to trust each other to do that. But the fact they did that meant that those guys, they saved about 300 people. And they went outside London, outside the city, got to the country. And each stage, one of the guys was a tent maker. And so each one of those guys saved them many times over, because they had the skills of really 6 people. So you've got to think that way. There's no ways that a householder in suburbia in America has the necessary skills. They're probably duplicates of each other. You know, you have an accountant one side and a lawyer the other, and it's like, what skills have you got? So it's like nobody's going to need your, you know, computer fixed. So it's like nobody's going to need accounting. So it's like, what skills have you really got? You guys are in real trouble. So yeah, I mean, I've said to Kevin and that those guys, they need to watch out, because in my view of history and my experience in South Africa, those guys are wasted. Those guys they're not going to survive. You know, those guys are kind of the first to go. That mindset is so bad, I can't tell you. You've got to get a mindset of, you know, like here in Greece. They're mutualists, they have family connections, they have strong traditions, they have, you know, endless amounts of legends and myths to draw upon, analogies from history, examples from recent history. You know, these hero figures like Escarina Bobalina, you know, one of my favorite, who's a woman admiral that was big in liberating Greece. And they have all these figures and stuff. So it's a kind of a psychological war chest of survival. So the Greeks have pulled through tremendous hardship in like World War II recently, and then after that, the Civil War. And they all get through it because they have a kind of saying like, we've all seen worse. It's like they can always cite, great grandfather got through worse. So you need that. We kind of going. We're such materialists that when these guys start prepping, they think in terms of material. They think in terms of good enough toilet paper. I tell you, the most useless thing for survival is toilet paper. I haven't used toilet paper in 4 years. It's like, most of the world uses water, and it's more hygienic. The reason why most people like the Arabs and Asians and stuff think that Westerns are such dirty, horrible people is because we use paper. We don't use water on our ass. The French get a pass because they use a bidet. But you should be using water to wipe your ass just from the point of cleanliness. It's basically, poo is water soluble. And I was staggered that people, when the pandemic broke out last year, people ran for toilet paper, and toilet paper is about the least thing you need. And that's what they ran for. But you see that materialist outlook is, I've got to get material resources and stuff. Those material resources will be exhausted in a week. You've got to think, where do you go after all the shit that Walmart runs out? It's basically that's why I say to Kevin, you've got to think in terms of the long haul. It's going to be a long, long grind. Collapse is not going to happen in one day. Basically, your collapse is going to happen in one day. You're going to have one shitty day that either wipes you out or you survive and get stronger. But the system's collapse is going to be long and drawn out. So don't make that mistake. There's no zombie apocalypse where you have to spend a week fighting off zombies. That's never happened and never will. It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we've been so ill-served because we've got all these bad examples, and then Hollywood has spent 100 years filling Westerners' heads full of shit. And they polluting our minds so that we're not prepared. You see, in times gone past, a lot of the legends and stuff had hidden information and coded information on how to survive hard times. It's kind of a medicine chest for psychological remedies when times get tough. Our medicine chest, in terms of psychological remedies, is empty. English people have a few things because they have a richer history. But America has nothing. How many can you point to, like, heroes of the Civil War? You think, well, we should be doing what Marty Bard did and stuff. I mean, you got like Johnny Appleseed. You've got, John, the steam hammer. What's the John Henry? There are a few of these characters, but I mean, what is like the Wizard of Oz going to do for you in terms of lessons for survival? What is Star Trek going to do for you? It's like, we got to think of mutualism like the Borg mind. That's like, dudes, the mythology is threadbare in America. It's all a load of shit. It's tinsel. So so that's. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I really want to emphasize this point, because I'm trying to forewarn people about what's coming and trying to make it easier for them. And one of the things is, you can just tell people if they're expecting it. Expectation is like 50% of the battle. If you know what's coming, and it does materialize, the fact that you expected it, triples the chances that you won't get as psychologically traumatized, and you will actually survive it. The real danger is you think everything is okay and it all goes to shit, and then you have a disaster situation that you were never expecting. So basically, these things do come in the night, knocking on the door. But it's very important that you have an idea. It's very good to go and look at disasters in the past. I mean, there's a rich catalog of disasters. You want to see how people survived them. Read about Sarajevo, read Rebecca Solnit and things like that. But you will do you a favor. It does you a favor just from the point of view of doomerism, because if you feel like you know what those situations are, you can imagine them in your mind, how you would survive and be Robinson Crusoe or something, you can you feel better in yourself. That's the right kind of prepping. The wrong kind of prepping is like getting silver and gold, getting ammunition and a gun. That makes you more insecure and more neurotic. So
Yeah,
the best preparation you could do is like reaching self-realization. That's the best preparation you could do.
right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the materials, how I imagine a person would collect the materials wouldn't just be for themselves, but I mean, ideally, it should be shared among others, right? Because, I mean, first, you're going to use up all the material in a week but if you share it with others, they might have something and you essentially have more to work with. I mean, I think that's how I see materials. It's not something to hoard, it's something to share.
Yeah, but you see, it's all reciprocity. So what you find or share today, people will give you back tomorrow. That's why I was saying in Kevin is like it's not barter. These people are thinking completely wrong. It's a gifting economy. So if you do some good to some neighbor now, they will return it later when you're in. So you don't have to think very hard about those kind of things because they're built into us genetically. So it's not something you have to think and plan for now. What you have to you don't have to acquire new habits. It might be good to acquire new skills, medical skills, basic first aid, that kind of thing. Skills are good. We're not very skilled, but the more important thing is to undo all the crap in your head. That's the problem. It's not to gain something. It's you need to lose all the shit. I tell you, it's a lot to lose. So in the sailing community, the lots of guys like me who basically refugees from the from the American corporate world and stuff, and we just got to the stage. Lots of guys afloat who just penniless and went afloat because it was that or suicide. They just couldn't take another day in corporate America. And they said, this is not living. We're just leaving. And so, semi-suicidally took to sea. If you speak to those guys, and you ask them, how long does it take you to detox from, the slave mindset in capitalists' work culture? How long does it take to get you that detox from the cubicle environment or something like that? And they told me 5 years. I've been to sea now for 5 years, and that's right. It is. You only start feeling like a human being after 5 years away from that culture. So you have to think of that. It's like, if you imagine in a collapse or something, you've got a really, really tough row to hoe, and then you also have to detox from all your crap shit. Basically, you're barely human after you've been spent a decade or two in corporate America. So you got to get all that shit out of your head, which is a task on itself, and then you have the day-to-day trouble on top. So you can see time and again, if you look at places that do survive a crisis, like Sarajevo quite well, is if you look at those guys, they haven't gone too deep into civilization. And so then they handle the collapse of civilization very well. And that's kind of like a rule. By the time you get to like the San people or something who wear T-shirts and shorts and shit, but they haven't really gone into the school system, or they don't have plaques on the shelf in their grass hut or anything to say like, I graduated cum laude with a diploma. They don't have that crap. But you see, those guys, as soon as civilization and the grid goes, they're fine. They don't have very far to fall. It's the more you live in industrialized culture till eventually you live in a high rise in Manhattan, you've got such a way to fall that most people can't make it. If you think like there is a big collapse, imagine Donald Trump in a really big collapse. He's only got one option, and that's to commit suicide. Because you can't go from that high-flying thing to say, what are you going to do? You're going to find a little community and then integrate with them somewhere in some like hippie. It's not available to them. They'll have to commit suicide.
What do
And
you
they
think
do.
about Donald Trump? Or is this just a Hollywood trope where he has these goons and he just pays off these goons, or he has
The
so much
goons,
material? What do you think
you see,
about
those
that?
guys don't have any resources. They're relying. It's all fake, right? They're all relying on this system. Donald Trump has no money at all. He's probably minus 2 billion or something. And those guys, you see, it's Hearst was a good example. I think Hearst was one of the first of these kind of modern guys. And Hearst was a newspaperman in San Francisco. His dad's made out in the 49ers. His dad found a lot of gold as a 49er. And he ran the San Francisco Chronicle, which is basically kind of like the Trump of, say, 1900s, the late 1800s. And he also did that. He had no money at all, but he was the equivalent of a billionaire. He bought so much art that he distorted the art market by about 30%, they reckon, through the turn of the century up until the 1930s. They reckon that Hearst alone bought so much art in Europe and America that he inflated the art market by 30%. Now, here's the thing. He never paid for a dime. He never paid a dime for that. Or he died with huge debts. So if you want to see more about this, see the movie Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is about Hearst. And when you see that Xanadu, you can actually go to that. It's basically Hearst Castle in California. So you can actually go and see that Xanadu in the movie Citizen Kane. And it's filled with crap. But so the reason why he never paid for it is he never had to. It's like he was the best customer of Christie's and all these auction houses. And so then they would invoice him and he would just chuck the invoice in the bin. And eventually, because nobody wanted to take him to court because he was such a good customer. So you say, well, is he a good customer? He's not getting any money. Say, well, yeah, he's a good customer because everybody thinks he's rich. So then what you can do is everybody becomes part of your big scam. And so everybody, if Hearst owed you money, you could never collect it, but you could sell it, you could factor it and maybe get 80% of the value or something. So they're kind of sharing the scam. When Hearst would buy some art, he would pay twice as much. Now historians say like, oh, well, he wasn't a very good art, he wasn't a very good assessor at art because he overpaid. No, he didn't. He never intended to pay. So he basically paying twice as much is giving the money to the guy that you're going to shortchange, because then Christie's would factor the bill for 80%. So, they wanted the amount unpaid to be as much. But you see that in effect, the guys are making their own currency just by not paying their bills. People can take their bills and use them almost as script. Now, Donald Trump is exactly one of those guys. He has 600 lawsuits. And the reason why is, first, it's how rich people in America arm wrestle little guys to the ground. If you do anything that Donald Trump doesn't like, he won't set his goons on you. He'll just sue you, and he'll outpay you. So you'll spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands in lawsuits, and if you can't pay that, he'll crush you. And that's why he does it. And the other reason is just to fend off creditors. So the guys are running a huge grift. Now, that if the system goes down, the markets go down, if there's a bond apocalypse, now with those guys are in terrible trouble now that they're printing up money. Basically, if the hyperinflation comes, those guys are all going to commit suicide because they don't actually have anything, but that'll become public knowledge if there's hyperinflation. So then they go down with the system, and that's Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, all those guys, they're going to go that way because it's all a big scam. It's all a big Ponzi scheme. There's not any real wealth, and so those guys don't have goons to protect them because the goons leave. They can't pay the goons, you see. So, you know, what's Donald Trump going to do? Go live with his mom? I mean, it's like, yeah, if you go and have a look, say, at the Romanovs, at the collapse of the Romanovs, they, you know, in Russia, when when the Bolsheviks took over Russia. So, you know, Anastasia and the Tsar Nicholas the first and stuff was Nicholas the Second was they in, you know, St. Peter's Palace. The communists have like got them under house arrest there. And the very first thing that happened, they were shocked because I saw this in South Africa too, is if you're one of these oligarchs and you have these peons like we did in South Africa, you start to delude yourself that they part, you know, all these slaves in effect are part of the family. And, you know, I was essentially brought up by a big African nanny, and she was like a surrogate mother to me. And then, you know, she was part of the family. She's kind of like, you know, definitely a member of the family. But not really. The loyalty that the slave owners think they have from the slaves is vastly inflated. So one of the first things the Romanovs found was that all the people that were the nannies to the kids and stuff like that, as soon as they didn't have to keep up the pretense anymore, they started to be brutal to the kids. And the first big wake-up call from Nicholas, when he realized he was really in trouble, was when he would go riding his bicycle around the Winter Palace while they were in, you know, under house arrest. And one of the guys who was one of his attendants and he thought was, you know, had a paternal relation, and he thought, well, he's a servant, but he's a member of the family. And he wasn't. All these guys were seething with hatred for the royal family while they were smiling and working. And so while Nicholas II was riding his bicycle in the palace grounds, this guy who he thought was his loyalist, you know, confidant and valet, stuck a stick through the spokes of the wheel of his bike, and Nicholas took a bad fall and got really hurt. And that was his first wake-up call, that they'd been living in a complete delusion. Up until then, everybody works to keep the Tsar's delusion going. You see, he has armies and armies of people that all, you know, basically lick boots and looking for a dollar. But those guys are all gone. They go in a minute. As soon as the goose is not laying any golden eggs, they're gone. So, you know, a guy like Donald Trump, he has no loyalty. He has no loyalty from any follower. He'll see lots of people there that are just, you know, trying to, you know, hangers on. But when the going gets tough and he loses all status, they're gone. It's really King Lear. You've got to read King Lear. They all become instantly like King Lear. And then King Lear had one confidant that remained with him, and that was his fool. You know, but his fool was kind of his shadow, and that's, he almost had a religious reason. It's almost a fealty. It goes beyond just a job, the role of fool. So that's why he's saying. But those guys are in tremendous trouble. I don't think people, you know, realize this. They can't imagine people like, you know, Elon Musk having a downfall. But he's heading for a downfall. This is, you know, Tesla stock is so high it would take 1,000 years to work off, you know, pay it off with the revenues he's getting. It's the PE ratios are, you know, some of the most extraordinary in history. So he's heading for a fall. Nobody can imagine these, you know, how the mighty have fallen. But just go and have a look at these guys in history. Look at the Match King, and you know, it's a Ponzi scheme. They like Ponzi, and even Ponzi got away with it. Even Bernie Madoff got away with it, because people think, but it's Bernie Madoff. You know, he's a big guy and rich, and they can't imagine him being in prison or something like that. But that's where they're all headed. So yeah, I hope I'm painting a picture here of you know, just reality. We have our heads so full of shit for brains that you need to get all that shit out of your head. All the thing that Elon Musk is a winner, and you know, you've got to work hard, and you know, we'll get back to stability, and you know, all the it's just basically you have to invert your entire world. It's been put upside down.
Yeah, it's good that I hope I think you're making it clearer now, because especially in the United States, and I know you're looking at US a lot more closely, just because you mentioned earlier, we don't really have a history to fall back on, or something to say, oh, this is what we should do. And it seemed like it all, because of what happened in the 90s, Eddie Bernays, everyone, well, from my observations, everyone seems atomized. When you go to suburbia, everyone has their own house, picket fence, and that's their unit. And it's like everyone has their own unit, and nobody really talks to each other. We put up a front, we just say hey, good morning, and that's all we know about each other. And I don't know who said this quote, but someone said, you don't know the person who just lives 20 feet away from you when you're in these. It's such a shock. It's
But
scary.
I'll admit this from my life. In the late 80s, I was a big, I was very, very spiritual and vegetarian, and then I had this kind of enlightenment moment. And then after that, I went on a kind of rumspringer, and I went to the opposite extreme and became, really yuppie, and had a $1 million apartment in London overlooking the Thames and stuff. And it was really, basically Thatcher kind of Thatcherite. And so during that time, we lived in this apartment in the West End of London. It was very, very fancy apartments with indoor swimming pools. One of these heavenly 80s things, kind of Wall Street, the movie, kind of those kind of things. So it was very jet set lifestyle, and flew airplanes and just sailed. They had a millionaire lifestyle. But in that place where I lived in there with my girlfriend, and she also had tons and tons of money, worked for Wahlbergs in the city. So one day we were just selling that apartment, and we're sitting there, and we have a buyer, and this buyer is somebody who knows S.G. Wahlberg personally. Basically knew that. So basically a very rich person, and it's all very toffee. And then on the TV, we were kind of like, what the fuck? There's our apartment. And we went like, what's our apartment? They're right there, and thing. And on the BBC, on like London News, and they're like, what's our apartment? And it turned out there were these two girls next door that got murdered. And we were like, holy shit. We always thought there was something iffy with the girls next door. And so then we thought, well, this is bloody awkward, because the sale's going to fall through now, because these rich people are not going to want to move in, because there's this kind of scandal where these two girls. So the police come around. Basically, the bobbies and all this. So and I come to the door on the Sunday, and I have a bathrobe on, and my girlfriend was half naked. It was kind of really embarrassing, but they are all coming. So you have these like 7 uniformed detectives in our living room there, and they start, because I'm the neighbor, they start asking questions. And they thought I was a fucking suspect, because they couldn't believe that we knew damn nothing about our next door neighbors. So they said, well, what are their names, and have you spoken to them? And we're like, no, never spoken to them. Nah, saw them come in, and the guys were like, but they're your next door neighbors. And we're like, dudes, you don't know how rich people live. Rich people don't talk to the next door neighbors. And the police couldn't believe it. So you could see they were getting more and more interested in me and my girlfriend. Luckily, what it turned out to be was, it was murdered by a guy who was in the opposite wing. And it turned out that they were high-class hookers. And he watched them come and go, and it did his head in. The fact that basically they, he could see them through the window and stuff. It was like through the back window, kind of, what's that, Alfred Hitchcock, Rear Window kind of thing. And so he was the guy looking at them through the rear window. It was exactly like Rear Window in Alfred Hitchcock. And he was the guy who came and killed them right in the night. And so, but for a moment there, we were suspects. And the reason we were suspects was we knew nothing about them. We had lived next to them for years. And, you know, you say hello in the elevator and you think, whoa, there's something iffy going on. Nobody has that many friends or that good. But they had wild Coke parties and stuff. And, you know, basically we had, the walls were built with, you know, big corridors in between. So they were deathly silent. So the whole place was deathly quiet all the time, while this underworld was going through it. And I'm just telling you this story to tell you that the richer people get, the less they have community, the less they know their neighbors, the more they have, you know, sycophants and people serving them and paid guests, and, you know, they have yachts and they have, you know, the skippers and called Antonio and the chefs called, you know, Jorge, and they all feel they're buddies with these guys, but their relationship is paper thin, you know, and so yeah, I feel almost sorry for those guys, because they are entirely reliant on their money and stuff, and they have no other option to shoot than to shoot themselves. Actually, since we're on this topic of shooting yourself, the real danger in collapse is losing hope and kind of shooting yourself. You look at Viktor Frankl and stuff in the death camps. They had a name, I can't remember for what it was, but guys that kind of just checked out. They just lost hope in the struggle. And they said you could see a guy do that, and as soon as they did it, they've only got days to live. You know, once they lose the fight, the will to fight, then they go quickly. And that's kind of the danger. You see, the preppers think the danger is all outside. You know, but what, like Kevin was saying, if you've got a line of sight, you can like shoot down the street or something. It's like, no, the demons come from the inside, not from the outside. So, you know, you might have some bad experiences, like you might get mugged or something. But how you affect if you get mugged or raped or something like that it's how you react is dependent on what's inside you. So this same two people can have the same trauma. Some people will be devastated, and other people will just have this kind of inner resilience and just move on from exactly the same trauma. And the reason is what's on the inside. So you can't really control what's on the outside. What these people are doing is trying to get control of the outside. And you saw that little, talking to Kevin, that little exchange we had about control. And I said to him, like, we assume we have no control. That is the better way to go, is to assume you have no control. And then Kevin said, well, you have control over your little family, your little castle. And no, you don't have control over that. What I didn't say was you have control over the inside. I didn't want to go there with Kevin, because then it's so horrendous can of worms with Christianity and all this. But you see, you can work on the inside of you in preparation for those kind of traumas, but one of the things in terms of just losing hope and suicide is it really helps to get a bloody-minded kind of attitude. You see, if you work from ego, if you work from the alien cortex, you get ego fatigue, and then when the ego in you dies, then you give up and you become one of those Viktor Frankl kind of victims. So you don't last long after that. But if you don't work from ego, especially if you crush your ego and you have this kind of bloody-minded attitude, that's very good. You see, the system in a lot of ways, these tests are tests of whether you will blow your own brains out. So they're not. I mean, you can just get hit, unfortuitously from the outside by somebody else. But the biggest danger is what you'll do to yourself. So let me give you an example. Generally, in terms of military, if you're in the military and you're a soldier, there's kind of in all, say, European armies, there's this mindset that you all fight on a front and you try not to get encircled, and if you get encircled, then it's all over. White flags go up, you win, and you'll get taken off to a concentration camp. And so, but that's how it was for the Germans, say, on the Western Front, and all the Europeans. It's basically whoever gets encircled, it's kind of like, okay, you win. It's kind of like sports. It's kind of the rules of the sport is if you get encircled, you surrender. Well, Stalin and the boys said to the Russians, like, no, we don't play that game. We're bloody Cossacks in Siberian, we're tough shit. And he said, like, they told all the Russian troops, just because you got encircled doesn't mean squat. Let the Germans encircle you. You've still got guns and ammunition. You give up when basically you run out of ammunition. They still got to take the gun out of your hand, Ivan. And so the guys went, oh, yeah, so you mean we're all encircled? That isn't the end? No, you just carry on fighting. They're like, encircle me all you like, arsehole, but you got to get the gun out of my hand, Fritz. I've still got guns and bullets, And the Germans were appalled. They were like, don't you know the rules? We got you surrounded. And you say, like, yeah, don't give a shit. Still got a gun. Come and get it, arsehole. And the Germans were like, damn, this is nothing we hadn't had to deal with before. Everybody else just gives up. So when they tried then to get these encircled Russians and stuff, the whole thing about Blitzkrieg was they easily encircled people and then they'd give up. But the Russians didn't do it. They said, we're encircled, so what? And then the Germans had to physically come in. Then they took heavy casualties. So then they'd have like 10 Russians encircled. They'd throw, brigades of SS in that of them, and they would get all slaughtered. So like, keep on coming. You see, what they need you to do is give up. So you shoot yourself or something like that. But if you don't, then the world's a little bit fucked. You see, it's like the movie in Braveheart. They say when he's on the rack, they say, plead for mercy. It's like Jesus on the cross. They say, do you give up your messiahhood and stuff? It's like they need you, the system and the psychopaths and the bullies. They need you to kill yourself. If they kill you, it's something entirely different, and that applies to the whole system. So you see, when people are cornered and trapped and they have no options, then they give up like rich people and shoot themselves through the head. Well, I'm saying, like, Desiderata number 8 says you're not allowed to do that. Well, no, it's not a law, but it's not desirable to do that. You just say to the bigger, and the reason why it's important, and the reason why Desiderata 8 is not so important is if you reach the point of self-realization, it's the point of breakdown. So your breakdown comes when you've completely lost hope and lost everything. That's the moment of realization, and that's your liberation. But if that's the point where you shoot your brains out, it's like, oh God, we almost made it. But you see, if you kind of lose everything, you lose your family and you lose all your friends and all your money and you're homeless, and then, at that point, people go and shoot themselves through the head or jump off a cliff or a bridge or something. But you say, like, no. You say, at that point, you go, well, the world is really stuffed now because I haven't got anything. All my creditors, I can't pay them off. I've got nowhere to live, so I'm going to sleep on a bench tonight. And you just say, like, you see that attitude of, like, okay, the world has fucked me, but, like, I'm not going to fuck myself. The world has to physically come and kill me. It's like, okay, I've got nothing. I'm down and out. Nothing more to live for. But I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting in the sun. I'm looking at the sky. It's like, I'm not taking myself out. It's like, if the world's a shitty game, then I'm going to show how shitty it is because you have to kill me. The world has to kill me. And you see, in that moment, you'll find that the world capitulates. You'll find your salvation in that moment. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I like that analogy, and I think it's good to be careful with I guess Kevin's group or a Christian, because they'll go after a self-sacrificing way. So okay, I won't do myself in, but you're gonna have they're going to go into the gas chambers kind of scenario. That's so. Is that
Yeah,
different too? You don't want
yeah.
to
See, in
also
South Africa,
willingly go into the
yeah,
gas chamber.
when Kevin says, "Oh, these guys must get out into the country and get armed and stuff like that," and it's like, oh, my blood runs cold, because what happened to the South Africans, and it's happening now, is those guys on the farms. So many of them. They're like 60,000 families or something. Those guys lined their kids up and they shot them. They come to the end of what I'm saying, and then basically they say, this is the end. We can't. That's the end of our world. We don't want to live in this new world anymore, and we'd rather die. So they go from this. I'll machine gun the San people and the Piraha, to protect my children. They go from that to something that's close, is I'll protect my children from any more suffering. I'll protect my children from this horrid world. And then they shoot them for that reason. So you see how close that is to saying, I will shoot anybody to protect my children, and then I'll shoot my children to protect them. See, it's like Goebbels did it. Goebbels did it in the bunker in Germany. When Germany, and you see, he could have, his wife and kids could have survived, right? I mean, Goebbels would have been probably hung, but he could have made it out of Germany. He probably could have got to South America. His wife and kids wouldn't have gone to Nuremberg. And so he had, these 6 kids or something. His wife and him decided to kill them. And they did in the Fuhrer bunker. And then kill themselves. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It's a tragedy. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's Goebbels." It's like, no, but these are kids, man. No. So the thing is, why? And the reason is that he was so keen on the Nazi ideology and the world that the Nazis saw, that he didn't like the thought. Neither his wife nor himself liked the thought of his kids living in the post-war world. So you might think, why not? It's post-World War, post-World War II world was great. It was the 1950s and cars with chrome and Coca-Cola and stuff. And they killed their kids because they didn't want them to live in that world. So the thing I'm trying to get across here is it's on the inside, right? The story and the control you have is how you feel things on the inside. And those guys are very, very shortchanged. They're shortchanged by Christianity, which is really a snuff thing. It's basically, Christianity is really a slave religion, and then it serves you very badly, because when you get cornered, then you get promised that there's salvation in heaven, and you think, like, if you listen to Jonestown and Jim Jones, and it's worthwhile listening to the recordings of what he's saying to all his followers, while they all being forced really at gunpoint to have the Kool-Aid. And what he's saying to them is, this is just a temporary plane. This is just a transition. We're moving on to a better place. Take the Kool-Aid. There's a better place. And so those religions of the book that tell you there's a better place are evil. Their final misservice to you is to tell you that there's some heaven after death. They say, no, if there's life and there's not life, but there's no heaven. So you have to, you have to play the game for life on Team Life, and not give up on Team Life, right? You're not supposed to die. You're supposed to live through this, and basically not forget that, and kill yourself, which is the big danger for a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I see why Christianity and all those religions seem to be so strong about sacrifice, because if they're willing to sacrifice their life, now they're exchanging it for something better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Which is
slave
a trap,
narrative
but
because
yeah.
it's an excuse to slaves. If you see, if everybody says, "Hey, we only got this one life to live," then they won't put up with any of this shit. See, a lot of people are living half a life or a life not worth living or unexamined because they think that there's something else. And you say, no, this is not a dress rehearsal. But you see, if things are shitty for you now, the only way they can justify to a slave why they're shitty is with some religion, like so okay, the Aryans, right? I think all of this goes back to the Aryans. The Aryans are the big bastards, and the Aryans took slaves. The reason to take slaves, right, in battle and things like that is really for mines, right? Is the problem is all these cultures when they become Bronze Age cultures and stuff, and they start relying on metal, and then the Iron Age, is they need metals, and to have metals you need to mine. So the no one wants to go down a mine. You see, well, one of the reasons why this green growth and ESG kind of society and stuff is nonsense is because somebody has to go down a mine. You can't just send machines down a mine. Somebody has to mine, and mining is kind of the textbook example of why our civilization doesn't work. Because if you're an economist, you say, well, no, you would just pay people enough to go down a mine. Well, the thing about mines is that if you paid a free man enough to go down a mine, it wouldn't be worth extracting any metal. It wouldn't be worth extracting gold or silver because they would demand so much for that. It's basically the fair compensation for working in a mine exceeds the profitability of any mine. And that's a dirty secret at the heart of civilization. So the only way to get people in a mine is to give them no other option. You can either make them peons like we did in South Africa. We just get them off the land, tax them, give dog taxes, poll taxes, all these kind of things to get them into the economy. And basically they just get them really poor and dependent on the economy. Then they have to go down a mine. The other thing is to just get a slave. And so those cultures, they're very authoritarian. And the reason is you need lots of convicts. Because you send convicts to hard labor. Hard labor usually means working in a mine, and so the only way we can run the civilization is with mines. And so it's a way. Slaves are primarily miners because it's the only cost-effective way of getting metals out of the ground. And that's why economists are all big liars, because if you were fair and compensated everybody for the job they did, no one would work in a mine. And so, I mean, even in like Britain, if you talk, oh, well, we had the coal miners and stuff. Yeah, but they all had black lung. They all were giving 30 years of their life. They had no option. So even, in the 1950s, when coal mining in Britain was mechanized and stuff, they were underpaying them and not telling them the truth of how the carcinogens and stuff from coal mining was getting to them, how black lung was getting to them. Later, when they all died and found out what was really going on, then they realized they'd been underpaid by thousands of times. But anyway, okay, so you get the picture that the Aryans need miners, and that's where that's why they give slaves. But now, in that thing, the slaves would just rebel. And so you have to have some religion and narrative to tell them, to justify why they have a shitty life down a mine, and then you're a pharaoh where you have a gold bath. So they're down in a gold mine with their life hanging on a thread, and then you're sitting in a gold tub with a hooker. The only way you can make that story work is tell them they get their reward in the afterlife. So they get their reward in the never never. And so wherever the Aryans went, you see this story following them. So you see them go to Egypt and you see the we all go to an afterlife, and you're giving up your life here for you live on in the kind of Pharaoh kind of thing. And then in the Christian and Islamic traditions and Jewish traditions, they all say, well, you get you go through Shoah and you get through your shit time, but there's paradise afterwards and eternal life later. And then you get to the Hindus and stuff, and they say, well, you get reincarnated. So sure, you're in a mine today, but that's because of past deeds. It's basically blame the victim. It's basically you put yourself in a mine because you must have done something really bad, and now karma has put you in a mine in this life. But you be a really good slave and die as a good boy, and then you'll be reincarnated in a better birth, and one day you'll put in enough good karma and you will be a Brahmin, and then you will also be sitting in the gold tub. Now go get back to the mine. So that now we've inherited all that crap in America. And so these guys are ill-served by this story saying life's shit now, but it's not the important thing. The important thing is that you have the right relationship to God, you a good boy, you toe the line, and then you'll get your reward in heaven. So you have a shit life and you die. There is no heaven. I mean, there is no heaven. There's like, where is it if there is? It's like, it's a bullshit story, obviously. There's no heaven because the details are different in every culture. So every culture that has a heaven always gets the details different. So it's clearly you can see it's a man-made invention. And then when you get to people like Jesus and stuff, the guys are really keen to have the details about heaven. Jesus, when we get to heaven, will our wife be waiting up there? Will we be in this body, or will we have a new one? When I die, will I be in the body when, if I die at 75, will I be in an old crippled body, old man, or will I be in at the prime of my youth? And Jesus always says, like, don't worry about heaven. Why? Because if you start looking into it, the whole fucking scheme falls apart. And so, so what I'm saying is, these guys, Bible thumping, AR-15 waving guys, are very, very ill served, right? It's a setup for cruelty and the collapse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think you've explained it very well. I mean, just recently I've been just seeing how preppers are trying to prep, and I don't see it lasting too long. Like when I see their strategies, when the grid goes down, they go off to a big bug out place, and they're going to meet with their buddies, and they're going to hunker down, and whoever comes, they're going to protect the location. And I felt uncomfortable. That's why I asked the question, how do we find people? Because clearly preppers they're able to find their people, but I don't think it's the people I'd want to be too close with. But yeah, I mean, as a mutualist anarchist, it's a different story. Or yeah, I think that's what I trying to get at.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to thank Mike for sharing that, because I was first thinking that, oh yeah, maybe we can learn something from preppers, but their whole perspective is, I guess, lost. But piggybacking on what Lord Hughes said about, like almost like dating advice. I was reading some dating advice a long time ago too, and they said that, in addition to knowing that your psychic energy will attract people without you're even trying, but the advice was also to go out into the world and pursue your interests, and then you will attract people that that are on the same wavelength. So for me, practically, I would see that as like building on learning skills. Like, I want to learn how to make shoes. So, or even just a basic stuff like that, then maybe you'll meet people with the same interest in developing skills, and then your network will widen. Maybe you'll meet somebody who makes honey, somebody who gardens like Sophie, somebody who is into herbal crafts. As you go out into the world and pursue your interests, then you're in the world of like people, and then your aura will probably attract them to you. So I don't know. That's just my
Yeah,
the
I think
learning that I
so.
have from this session.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I would say is, but there have to be genuine interests. So don't go and do dance classes to meet guys
Right,
if you're
tango
not interested in dance,
or
right?
line dancing.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I mean is don't go and do something you're interested in. So basically, what I'm saying is follow a passion that you're interested in. Don't go and do some activity just for to meet people. You must pursue
Yes,
the activity genuinely because you're interested
correct.
in it.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah, my cousin said that was the best way to meet girls was to go to dancing.
yeah, yeah. We used to do that too because we found that there's like when guys go to meet, they find places to go to meet girls, then they always go to guy things like scuba diving or hang gliding, and they meet a whole lot of guys there. And then all the girls, they go to dance classes and shit to meet guys, and
Cooking
so
lessons.
cooking lessons and stuff. And then they're all girls there, and you never meet them. So, but if you figure that one out, then you go to the dance classes and the cooking lessons, and you only have 2 guys and like 30 girls, and you're like, whoa. But that's
I'm
but,
gonna take
but
some shop classes, cabinet making.
yeah, yeah, if you do an adventure sport, if you want to meet guys, go skiing or something. The guys think that's but but it's not. You see, if you do that, it's just a dating ground. It's just a meat market, right? You're
Right,
far
right.
better off pursuing
Genuine
an interest and
interests.
a genuine interest. Yeah. So if you do something that you love, you'll find somebody that loves that, and then it's a whole lot better than just. I just came to dancing because I wanted to meet some guy. It'll never work. Yeah. So first pursue the internal stuff, and then the rest follows on. Yeah. So is it it's it's really something to tell young guys, because young guys think of in terms of dating as they pursue women, right? And it's well, the same applies to the universe, basically to all sexes. If you think of the universe as, say, Lilith or Maya, Kali, but the universe is the prima mater as material. Just think of her as Inanna or something like that. And then we all male to the universe from the universe's point of view. And if you pursue the universe or females, they're kind of flattered, but they're not interested. What really interests the universe and women, if you're a guy, is if you're not interested in them. If you're self-contained and happy in yourself, that kind of sparks women's interest. Is it? But if it's good to tell young guys this, that women are always scanning. If women don't have a guy, they're always scanning. They always got the radar going, boom, 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 looking for guys. And they're not, guys that are showing off and guys that are parading and guys that are pursuing them and stuff, they reject them all. The ones that they really want is a guy who's not looking for anybody. He's just sitting there. He's obviously single. He's completely happy with life and self-contained, and then like, man, they go. It's like they'll lock on and they'll go for that. But you can't fake it as a young guy. So you can't. It doesn't work to go and like try and. Well, maybe you can fake it, but it's better to be it. So it's like the best advice for to young guys for meeting girls is work on yourself and forget about girls, and then you'll find them flocking. Yeah. What do you what do the girls think about that advice?
I agree.
I haven't let out any female
I-
secrets here, have I?
No, you're absolutely right. You have to work on yourself. You have to have things in common with the other person. You can't just say, "Oh, he has a lot of money. I'm going to marry him." It's not going to work.
Yeah.
One of my girlfriends said she was very attracted to power. She said that she didn't care if the guy was good looking or not, as long as they were
Yeah,
powerful. Maybe
yeah.
she's talking more about confidence, but I yeah. So, but for me, I'm not that attracted to power. I think
Yeah,
I'm
but there are a
attracted
good
more.
number. Good
Yeah.
number of women are attracted to power. So Henry Kissinger said the greatest aphrodisiac is power, but there are a good number of people. So in like the first video I did, I put this little snippet out of Scarface, and the script that most guys learn in our culture to run off is that script with Scarface, because the thing I'm talking about is basically the scene was he comes from Cuba where the rules are different, and then they come to America and you have this kind of materialistic culture, and the guy tries to pick up girls around the pool. Scarface's buddy, he tries to pick up girls around the pool and completely lands on his face. And then Scarface explains the rest of the movie to him. And he says, look, in this country, you got to get a money. You get a money, you get a power. You get a power, you get any fucking girl you want. And then he goes on to prove that in the rest of the movie. But in getting the money and the power, that's his downfall. And that's pretty much the American story. Is basically the guys are scrambling over each other to get the money and get a power, so that then they can get the woman. And the women set up that game. The woman then, like in our culture, it's not universal, but in our culture they like the dark triad. So the dark, you know what the dark triad is?
No.
Psychologists have this thing called the dark triad. It's basically the dark personality traits, basically psychopathy or sociopathy. It means aloofness, callousness, cruelty. I think I can't remember them exactly, but those kind of things. It's basically narcissism, cruelty. Yeah, so but basically those are the three. You get the idea. Kind of complete dicks. And what psychologists have found is that a good portion of women, and in fact most women, are very attracted to those bastards, those dark personality traits. So then you get these guys like Sam Vaknin, who makes a career out of talking about narcissism, because all the women go, yes, my guy turned out to be a narcissist, and you say, yeah, because you kind of bred men in America to be that way.
But why are women attracted to those? Because they look at them as a challenge, as a project to reform, or
The conventional answer is Darwinian, and so now if you read things like Sex at Dawn and these guys that kind of like more humanist, they don't buy into this theory. But the common garden theory is that those bastards rise in society because we have a prison yard society. Then those guys are likely to get resources. So the conventional wisdom is that it's a Darwinian thing, and it's actually not cultural. It runs deeper in, well, I don't think it's in the genes of, say, the Piraha or anything, but it's in the genes of anybody that's descendant from an Aryan. And what they say is, well, we've selected for those genes because those bastard guys have more resources. And so the women are seeking resources so they could look after a progeny, and then a progeny are more successful. It's a very bleak philosophy, but that is Darwinian philosophy. And so they do prove that women do like bastards. And you can actually, as a guy, you can easily fake it. You can easily fake being a complete bastard, and you'll see it really turns women on. I have done it before in my life. I've done things that are like really, oh man, that's evil. And then you can see a number of women. You can just see it in their eye. It really turns them on. So most women will go like, "Oh, that's really horrible, bad," and stuff. And a few will go. You can see a wicked little smile and a glint in their eye, and you think, that got you moist. So you can see it as a guy doing that, but yeah, it's because of our prison culture. It's I don't think you'd find this in indigenous cultures. So it's been hanging around too long in markets and cities. The city has got into our genes. We've been in cities for 5,000 years, but I think it goes much further back. If you read the stuff that I've written, I think it goes back to marketplaces, and marketplaces are much older, maybe 60,000 years. So they're going to trading places, and then basically they're breeding grounds for that kind of psychopathy, because the mere fact that you attracted to breeding grounds, markets are breeding grounds, but obviously the women that go there are hookers, and the guys that go there are reptilian brain. So you can see how it's an incubator for this kind of bad genes. And then I think that's what bred the Aryans. They must have had the first cities, and they're probably somewhere under the Black Sea now. They're probably flooded now. But by Göbekli Tepe and that, my reading is that it's a big marketplace and kind of festival. And the guys that are going there, they're selling religion, and they're trading, they're developing the rational mind. And the ratio is for trade is, are you ripping me off? Quantity surveying is like, I give you this, I give you that. Let's see who can get the better deal. And that's the breeding of the mind. And then whoever gets the more resources and power, then they get the most hookers. They breed best. And on we go with the city. I think that's what's happened. That's my theory anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just looked it up. It was 4 dark personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellian, psychopath, and sadism, everyday sadism.
That's the ones.
Very appealing.
Yeah, guys, if you want girls, that's what you're gonna be. No, but I mean, look at it. I mean, look at Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is about as handsome as I am. In other words, if he didn't have loads of money, he wouldn't shape very well. And and look at him. He's narcissistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, and it's like, yeah, if he doesn't manage to pick up women, he can always go to Jeffrey Epstein or get a few that way. But that's what we're breeding. This is why civilization. We don't back out of civilization and just invent some new and nicer way to live. The city has got into our genes, and so just the fact that women are genetically predisposed in our culture to like the dark triad traits, and then it means that they're breeding them. So I think they've been breeding them for about 50,000 years, but they've at least been intensively breeding them after the Göbekli Tepe. And then that explains a lot. But you see how far away we are from, say, XR, saying, well, we'll all be from the heart and have a regenerative culture. And I say, yeah, you also got about 60,000 years of genetics to wipe out in a section of us. And that section is pretty much white people and a few Asians. But yeah, I mean, I don't think indigenous people like the San people and the Puruha people genetically is pretty. Those guys have been doing the opposite. The Berbers and stuff, and those indigenous people, they've been weeding those guys out. So they get those guys won't survive. If maybe if you Maori or Polynesian or stuff, those guys are a little bit suspect, but on this score. But in general, island nations in most of the Pacific, say, is like, I don't think those guys with those trays will survive. They will literally knock them on the head. You see, it's that movie Fitzcarraldo, where Werner Herzog went with his best mate, Klaus Kinski. Klaus Kinski is a right old nutcase. He's dead now, but you're right, old nutcase. And Klaus Kinski actually shot Werner Herzog, but they were still friends afterwards. But when they were filming Fitzcarraldo, they were literally taking this ship over through this mountain in the jungle, just like the original movie that they were, like the original Fitzcarraldo. So the movie was even more challenging than the original story that they were making the movie about. And Klaus Kinski throughout the thing was a complete arsehole. Now, they had a lot of indigenous Amazonian guys in like grass skirts and that helping, as laborers to haul the ship over the thing. And they were real guys out of the jungle in the Amazonian rainforest. And when they saw Klaus Kinski being a complete psychopath, they came to Werner Herzog and they said, like, do you want us to pop him for you? And Werner Herzog thought about it. They're like, yeah, but maybe we better finish the movie first. So he said no. But the reason why they came and asked him is because they couldn't understand why Werner Herzog didn't do it. They said, like, if a guy goes like that in our tribe, we get the demon out. Bump! One shot. Yeah, we've gone downhill in a lot of ways. But most, everybody thinks, oh, witch trials and all of this stuff is like, it's really barbaric, and we've come so much further since we don't do witch trials. And I'm not so sure. I think a lot of these guys, you're far better off thinking in terms of, say, shamanic people and just say, like, these guys have an irredeemable demon in them. Just pop them on the head. You're not going to cure them. And modern psychotherapy and psychology and stuff backs that up. Is these psychopaths, Musk and Bill Gates and Bezos and Zark and all these creeps, they're the Koch brothers and that, they're irredeemable psychopaths. So they glib, they're superficial. Biden's one of them. He's glib, superficial, and rotten to the core. And there's only one solution for those guys. There's no cure. You ask any psychiatrist or psychologist, they'll tell you there's no cure for them. And so those guys are breeding in our society. And not only that, they're rising to the top because of those dark triad traits. They're rising to the top and, becoming presidents and stuff. And people are lauding them. And you presume that they're spreading their genes around. And so the situation is just getting worse. And it would be a lot better if you did what indigenous people, you can see those guys, those traits, before people are 4 years old. So in those indigenous cultures, they just go, oh, this one's a rotten one. Have a little council of the elders. One of the elders gets a short straw. They take the little guy off for a little long walk into the wilderness. The elder comes back and the little bastard doesn't, and there are no questions asked. And that's the way it should be. I mean, even the Romans did that. So we're not doing ourselves any favors here, because you could think this is all really rather callous and is say, no, it isn't. It's like, look at a psychopath like Madeleine Albright. You could say, well, it's brutal to kill a little 4-year-old little Madeleine just because she shows, signs of being cruel to cats. And you say, not really, because if she's cruel to cats at 4 years old, she's Madeleine Albright by the time she grows up. And Madeleine Albright, 500,000 Iraqi children. So the fact that you were too squeamish to squat this little Madeleine bug means that 500,000 Iraqi children had to die. So it's like, I think we should be reviving some of the old ways.
Yeah, that reminds me of...
Yeah, go ahead. Well, you're on mute.
Yeah, you just cut off there.
You can type it in the chat.
Yeah, Divine Beast, you're on mute.
You can't say anything bad about
All right.
Madeleine Albright.
Why?
That's why Divine Beast was cut off.
Oh, right. Oh, shit. Is that a
Oh.
keyword?
I don't
I
know.
don't know. What?
I'm just being silly.
No, you could be right. You know. Wait. I think there's something wrong with my mic.
Or
I'll type
maybe,
here. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll type it.
Oh, I want to say regarding your London apartment, the more money you have, the thicker the walls you can get. The poorer you are, the thinner walls you have. So that's what, usually is the case. So
Yeah, that was definitely the case in my yuppie lifestyle. Is that those apartments was like a mausoleum. Actually, my girlfriend at the time, she was more kind of working class or origins, and she didn't like it. She felt it was like a mausoleum living in those rich places because they're so deathly quiet. And I think she's right. Is that those guys are living in kind of mausoleums. Hey, we can hear you now.
Test.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. I just unplugged and replugged it, so I think we're probably good then. All right. So I can't remember. It was in some video. Derek Jensen. He was talking about. I think it was the Inuit or one of those northern tribes that if there was like a sociopathic person who wasn't like sharing and they're being cruel, the guys would take him for a hunting trip and throw him off an ice floe.
Yeah. You've got it because the cost of the behavior is just too damn high for indigenous people.
Yeah, and it's really messed up because in our culture, when they like teasingly say "nice guys finish last," that's unfortunately true.
Yeah, but you see what's embedded in that A, it's a race, and B, it's a competition.
Exactly.
And you see, no indigenous people would say "nice guys finish last" because they wouldn't know what you're talking about. Finish what last? And
Exactly.
You say, well, the race. What race? Well, we're all in a competition. Are we? We're not. We all have a good time.
Yeah, when I learned about the whole competition, I just didn't want any part of it. That's why, like, I'm sort of a hermit. Yeah.
I was known for that in school because in my school they basically were grooming you for empire and to basically be a soldier, really. So it was really like an introduction to the army. But I was very, very anti-sports in that because I saw exactly what the Monty Python thing and the meaning of life is. All of those sports, I knew the history of them, and they came from Waterloo. They came from the Battle of Waterloo, and what had happened is Wellington came back from the Battle of Waterloo, and he would go around in these formal dinners and stuff. Because he had beaten Napoleon, then, well, it was Blucher. But anyway, in England, Wellington was credited with it. And so he went around all the dinner circuit and, gave these lectures on how he beat Napoleon. And he completely changed the English school system and made the grammar school system. And what he said was basically Napoleon was beaten on the playing fields of Eton. What he was saying was, it's because we teach our kids cricket and sports and stuff that soldiers and maneuvers on the field are just an elaboration of sports.
Yes,
sports
exactly.
Sports is preparation for the battlefield, and so they took that to heart. And then all these things like rugby, rugby, you got the shit kicked out of you. It was compulsory for us, and you can clearly see that they put you in the cold, they put you in the mud, they put you in the rain, and it's all preparing you for war. And then you see in The Meaning of Life, they have that little scene where these guys are doing sex education, and then he says, all right, Blinken's I'll see you in the afternoon in the game against the Masters. And then basically they wind up in this, rugby game, and the Masters are knocking the shit out of the kids and the guys in the mud. And then they cut to World War I with the guys in the trenches. And the Monty Python guys got it instantly that, what they're doing there is getting you ready for the mud in the trenches. And so I knew that at the time, and then I would say to all the fellow boys that were all like, right, and they'd say to me, Hugh, you've got no team spirit. And I'd say, yeah, this one guy who I met later, he came to America, and I met him, 40 years later in America. And we compared notes, and he remembered this very, very well. And his name was Solly, and I said to him, Solly, we were forced to watch the first team play, another brother school and stuff, and it was the biggest thing known to man. And I didn't clap, I didn't stand up, I didn't cheer. And Solly turns to me and he says, Hugh, you've got no team spirit. And I said, Solly, these guys are going to be out of school in a year. The guys we're watching, they've got a month to go before they graduate. You're never going to. Nobody's ever going to remember this game. Nobody's ever going to remember the score. They're just sitting. We're sitting here in the cold and the rain, and they're getting us to shout and cheer because they're indoctrinating us for war. And Solly's world just came crashing down. And he remembered that 40 years later. But I think I changed him from that moment because he didn't see it until then. He thought it really mattered. And I just showed him it didn't matter a damn. You could, that's the whole thing about sports is it doesn't matter who wins. You just play again the next round.
Yeah, and I don't even think they try to hide it anymore because when I was in like high school, there was military recruiters walking around, so it's like no secret. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I saw military recruiters quite a bit when I was in high school.
Yeah, Jesus. Don't get me started on sports in school in America.
Yeah.
So my kids, the same would happen with my kids. They start kids with soccer, and these parents would go up and down the sidelines, yelling at these kids. They were like, 5 and 6, and they would be yelling at them. They had to, the teachers and stuff had to come and calm some of the parents down and ask them to sit down because they were starting to yell and swear at these little kids, their own kids. And these guys were saying like, kids, basically, I'll give $10 for everybody. If anybody on my team that scores a goal, they're saying to their kids, I think, what the hell are you saying? But almost universally, those guys would say to me, they said, how can you be so calm? I would just sit there going, these people are all insane. And then I would be just sitting on the sidelines. They thought, how can you not be jumping up and down like us? And almost universally, those kids, they hated soccer. And they never learned to play the game. It was just punishment. And so it completely backfired on all of these guys. And I just wondered, it's American culture is very, very sick. It's pathologically sick, whereas it's just a normal everyday culture.
Oh yeah. And another thing that really made me upset. So I went to a mandatory meeting for work, and it was about suicide prevention. And they have this little program where they walk you through how to help person calm them down from committing suicide, but they didn't mention anything about what causes this shit. So I raised my hand and I laid into this lady about how fucked up our culture was, because that pissed me off. Like, I've had friends commit suicide, and it just it pissed me off so fucking much to not hear her criticize how the school is a cruel regimentation process, which I still remember. I haven't forgotten that shit. How the workplace is torture, how the politics is insane, how the psychologists just numb you with medication. Like, it's just a bunch of bullshit. Really pissed me off.
Yeah, but isn't it incredible that they like say, look, our society and culture, which is all so fantastic, and we're all going to Mars with Elon Musk. But anyway, you must know that you're going to find a few of these people commit suicide. And so they give you suicide training. Basically what they're saying, as you say, is they know it's going to happen. They know it's them. But they're not going to change the system that's making them commit suicide. Sorry. They're going to train you on how to handle it. And basically it's the same as Foxconn, where they just, in China, they just put up nets to catch the guys instead of actually addressing the reason why they're jumping off the roofs. Yeah,
it's they have this, I don't know, their view is all messed up. Like they view that like the environment is separate from the organism. It's like, no, it's not. You can track what's causing people to feel this way. Like, I don't know. I got really pissed off at that lady. Like, I didn't lay into her as much as I wanted to because they probably would have threw me out of the meeting. But I brought up some stuff, and it made the whole, I could feel it, the whole room, everyone's hair was standing up because they didn't like what I was saying at all.
Yeah, but you gotta feel sorry for the buggers. You know, I was just depressing myself a little bit before this call by reading this thing about how this first school in Texas is being designed for shooters. So this is like a kid's school. They're designing it with no long corridors or something that you can shoot down. They're all kind of these defenses against shooters. So they're designing a school for shooters. You know how sick that is?
That's really sick. Yeah, that's fucked up. It's like
you're saying, we know that the school is so bad that it causes kids to shoot it up. But we're still going to build the school. We're just going to make it resistant to their shooting. You say, what is this goal you're pursuing that's so desperate that you will plan for kids to shoot it up? It's you can almost say that the people that are running the system are the shooters, because they know what they're doing is going to result in shooters, but they're not changing anything they're doing. They're pushing forward and making it resilient to shooting. You think like, you're culpable. The schools need to be shut down. When kids are starting to shoot up the schools, how stupid are you? Or is this fucking school system and the establishment so fucking idiotic that they carry on with this quixotic project of schooling kids?
Yeah,
and they just barrel forward. It's like we're going to double down and carry it. Like, no, kids are shooting up the schools. It's time to stop the fucking schools.
Yeah.
Shut the schools down. What kind of message do you need to know that this is not working? Kids should not be schooled. It's just fucking nuts.
Yeah, it honestly really depressed me that COVID didn't get the school system shut down. I was like wanting that to happen so much, but yeah, no, they're gonna fucking knuckle down and keep it going until we're all dead, pretty much. They're never gonna give it up.
It's almost like... Go ahead.
And like that meeting, that suicide meeting, when I brought up the culture stuff, and it just made people kind of, tense towards me instead of the system. I just proved that we're gonna the ruling class, they're gonna knuckle down and not let go, and the slaves are gonna keep being slaves, and they're never gonna stop. Yeah, that's sort of.
Yeah, but we're getting to the end of this game. So even the stuff that Alison McDowell is talking about with. Impact tokens and the getting toddlers and pre-K schooling and making sure that these people have metrics, and then basically the social good is traded on Wall Street and by hedge funds like State Street and Blackwood and stuff like that, BlackRock, and I don't know how far we're going to get down this route, because the collapse is coming. It's going to be interesting to see. And I wonder how we're heading for totalitarianism, but I wonder how totalitarian this thing can get, because I just saw this thing about the solar flares and stuff that are coming, and it's I can see a really, really dark world coming where they try and push ahead in that kind of rubble that you see in 1984, those kind of hellscapes with rubble, where they're trying to, make cell phones and chips and this techno dystopia in this world of rubble. And I can really see that, in the midst of, in the midst of real deprivation, economic problems and violence, insurrection on the streets, and a lot of unrest. I can see them pursuing these kind of goals. So it's kind of it's very dark what we're heading for. But
when I read 1984. My immediate thought was, this is the hell we get after collapse. That was my first thought after I finished the book. I'm like, this is what we get after this global civilization falls, is this bullshit.
Yeah, but I in that thing to Kevin, I'm trying to instill in people how long this can be drawn out. You see, the things, the scenario I'm talking about, like the clathrates in the Arctic and stuff, is they're not fatal, right? You get a 0.6 degree rise, and as the planet dies, and you after the first clathrate burst, if you got a 50 gigaton burst, it would raise temperatures enough to start a feedback loop. But you have to imagine scenarios in the middle of this. They're geoengineering their way out. They're doing clouds. So you have to imagine that the oceans are getting more acidified, while they're fighting the zombie fires in the Arctic, and they're also fighting a war. And you have to imagine them fighting, and it's very geoengineering. One of the things that I never talk about, but I really feel is one of the reasons why you don't want to do geoengineering is you're drawing out the suffering. And it could be really drawn out if you just let the system collapse, like the preppers think it is. You'd be doing everybody a lot of favors. But I think most people, underestimate. I mean, most doomers underestimate the ability they have to string out hell. So but with things like geoengineering, I mean, they're just going to make things worse, and they do, but they just string out the agony. So it's important for groups like us to think about this, because it's not like, oh, we've got 5 years, the BOE happens, and then, well, projects like ours are no longer useful. We might have a very long haul, right? So in those kind of 1984 hellscapes, what you need is societies and underground networks and stuff, like that. Those are crucial, and so we might be building one of those here, so it might be long lived.
May I ask, are there enough resources for them to proceed with geoengineering? I thought we were running out of materials, or are they going to go into a mode of squeezing all the materials they can get out and making us all miserable, mining
Oh yeah,
literally, metaphorically?
yeah, they'll do that, but the problem with geoengineering is very cheap. So if you see the ones that Bill Gates are doing, like Scopex, is seeding sulfates in the stratosphere. So if they do solar radiation management with sulfates, that's very, very cheap. It's 2 billion or something a year could keep that, could lop off a degree or more in global heating, at the expense of the oceans, which would be acidifying very fast. But it's relatively cheap to do that. The marine cloud brightening and stuff is also very cheap. Putting those glass ferrules on the Arctic is reasonably cheap. I mean, it's but you see, yeah, you have to imagine them doing all of these things, and then they're still burning all the oil. They're still deforesting the. I'm telling you, those geoengineering things would hammer the ecology. I mean, like these guys are like, oh well, marine cloud brightening is you just get a few ships and you make them shove jets into the stratosphere. It's like there are going to be consequences of that. I mean, basically just the fish that you're going to suck up. But I mean, changing the climate in that is going to change bird migrations, fish migrations. It's a political act. All of those things, even weather modification, is a political act with political repercussions. So if you put silver iodide in clouds so that you get some rain on your crops, what you're doing is causing a drought further downstream. So that's in China they're already doing massive weather modification in Tibet, and it's the dry northern part of China that's taking the hit. But if you can imagine other people, say India, doing, say, Scopex like solar radiation management with sulfates, that's going to change the monsoon, and it's definitely going to change China's climate. So you get to a situation where they would say, you know, stop your weather modification or we're going to nuke you. And if anybody nukes anybody else, then that's, you know, you might be in a nuclear winter and stuff. So you can see how what you can expect is masses of instability. You know, I want to paint as dark a picture as possible because there aren't any rosy ones. There's no Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a Green New Deal where we all have jobs, 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 and, you know, we all go on happily and it's a peaceful world. We all cooperate and we have one health and one world, and, you know, we have we handle pandemics and it's all a transhumanist future and AI does all these great things and all the people are fed all over the world. It's like that isn't happening. It's not going to happen. It just do the maths. You can just superficially just run a few figures in a spreadsheet. You can see that this is not going to happen. And the thing is that they know this isn't going to happen. They're faking us out. So they know exactly what's coming. You can tell by all all their actions and their posture that they know. Bill Gates is a psychopath. He's a fucking psychopath. And you can hear when he talks about things, you'll hear he's got this funny little laugh. So he does this positive act and all this, you know, very smooth little, you know, Car the Python out of Mowgli kind of thing. And so he's the very genial frog. And then you'll see the guys would ask him a little question, like, and it's a hard question, like, can this really be done and can we feed 7.8 billion people? And then you'll see him, he does this little strange little laugh. He goes, and basically what he's saying there is, you kind of got me. You know, he knows that we all fuck. But what he's doing and his buddies are doing is they know that 7.8 billion people, 10 billion people, those people, it's a huge eugenics program. They're doing a huge eugenics program. Why he does that little laugh is because you've kind of caught him out in all his programs and all this transhumanism and all the stuff that the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates, all these foundations, the Rockefeller foundations, all these guys, there's so many of them, they all know that there's a huge population die-off. And so, you know, that's factored into all of the stuff where he has machines picking the fruit in that. And you say, why? There's going to be endless numbers of, you know, homeless people south of the border that can pick fruit. And say, like, and then he'll do the little laugh because he knows they're not going to be there. The fertility is crashing. So basically, males all over the world are going to be infertile in the next few decades. They already have half the fertility, and you know, from not a deliberate eugenics program, but because of all the chemicals and stuff involved in the industrial system. But you see, I think that they think it's a good thing. I think that they think there's nothing wrong with that. But in general, they've been planning this for a long time. As far as I can tell, piecing it all together, that after the Club of Rome in 1974 and the limits to growth, all those guys like McCulloch and all of those, not so much the Club of Rome, but the cyberneticists, that they all reacted to that. They didn't sweep it under the carpet. They started planning for 2020, which was the crucial date in the limits to growth. So they started planning for the limits to growth about 50 years ago. So what we're seeing now is they in behind closed doors worked out the ramifications of a rising population and peak oil, and they've run all the numbers, and they decades and decades ahead of us and all our thinking. And so they're working in concert for a big die-off. You can see it. It's written between the lines in so many documents that they have their own language, but you can read the documents in the CFR and stuff like that, and you clearly get that. You say, hang on a minute, these bastards are eugenicists. And you say, yeah, You see, I've worked with some of them. I worked with a guy who was a decision theorist. He was one of the big decision theorist guys, and he was a professor emeritus at oops, I better not say. But anyway, a university up in the Northwest. And the reason I hooked up with him because he wanted me, he got referred to me as a guy who could do this this software for him. The software for him is a bit like the stuff that Alison McDowell's talking about. And it was how to popularize making good decisions. So these guys are decision theorists. And the way I'll tell you quickly how decision tables and stuff work is that you put all your options down here, you put all the values that you have, all the goals you're seeking across, and then you find which option dominates, and it's all rational. So then you can make a rational choice, and they do all this research and say that if you follow this, whatever dominates, you just shuffle everything around so the dominating tasks and values wind up in the top right-hand corner, and then you know that the choice at the top is the one you should do. It's robust, shows that it has least regret, which is the measure for a good decision. And then they do make a little compromise at the end. They say, and you should check it with your intuition. So what these guys are saying is they want an app that forces all these dumbass proles, us basically, to make left brain decisions because people are unable to make, they just act by instinct and they don't make good decisions. So he's saying, we want an app, a phone app, so we can get people making good decisions en masse. And then, the last thing is you check it with your intuition just to double check. And that means you check with the other 4 layers. So the older 4 layers, you make sure they're okay with the alien cortex's choice. And so that's the thing. So he wanted to actually start a company after I did the software for him. Then he wanted to start a company because he said, yeah, well, you're a businessman, you know business. I get the funding and I've got all the academic chops. We'll have unlimited funding and you run the company. And then I went, well, okay, I'll do it if you can convince me of why you want people to do this decision step. So I plugged away at him, and eventually it turned out what motivated him, his whole life is decision theory. And he's talking to these guys who work with Nash and in the RAND organization and stuff. These are the background. And so the guy said, well, what motivates him personally is his sister. He finally got personal and said his sister made some very bad decisions in her life. He wouldn't tell me exactly, but I got the idea that she got pregnant out of wedlock or something. And so to him, he's saying, like, to get his sister under control, she wouldn't have made that bad decision if she had had an easy way of popularizing good decision-making theory. So in other words, he thought that she wouldn't have got banged up if she could make rational decisions on her phone. And it's like, I don't think people that get banged up would actually run, should I screw this guy? Let's do the decision table. It's like, he didn't see it, and his pals didn't see it either. So they think that you can make people left-brained and rational, and you can do it with software. So what's hidden in all of this is the Alison McDowell stuff. You see, what you have to imagine on the back end is that they would give you tokens, and they would, you see, when they first trialed the software, they found that all the kids hated it. No kid would make a decision with this software. And so they said, so he went all over the world asking all his pals why. And eventually he came to this guy in the UK, and the guy said to him, well, what's wrong with what you're doing is people think in terms of stories. So what your software is it doesn't have a story. So then he got me to modify the whole thing in this very patronizing way. He says, first you're in the forest of indecision and complexity. Then you do this, and they gamified making a decision on your phone. And I was like, but But still, I actually, I never did start the company with him because he never convinced me that it was a good thing. And I showed him, I did lots of software and modeling to show him that left brain decision making is actually long term is counterproductive. So I showed him all this, say goal oriented models. Imagine this. I did a little model. Imagine it's something like this. You have a field of flowers that are all random, and then you have a bee. A bee is put randomly on this field, and the bee goes, in some strategy, flowers are different sizes, and there's the bigger payoff, the bigger the flower they go with. So what strategy does the bee use? Now, if you use this guy's strategy, who's a decision theorist, then they should go to the optimal. They should take the optimal path. They should basically do a cost benefit of each one of the closest flowers. I'm not boring anybody with this, right? You interested? Because it's important for how they think in the world. But.
Oh no, yeah, I'm getting this. It kind of reminds me of I can't remember the guy's name, but some Marxist guy talking about how the managers of the capitalist system are pretty much trying to turn all human beings into input-output nodes.
Yeah. But the idea is that basically everybody behaves rationally. So you see, what happened is all these economists and these guys in these think tanks, they went through a bit of a crisis because Daniel Kahneman and these guys came and said, people are not rational. All the economists said we're all rational agents. So they made all these models that now are becoming Julia McDowell's. That's the development of them. But where the genesis of those is that economists modeled everything as say econs. They call us econs because econ was a random agent. They all think we all atomized and we just selfish, goal-seeking little atoms. All their models work from that, and that's the world we live in. And so what the psychologists came in and said, wait, people are actually not rational. And they showed all these biases, like, for example, loss aversion and all of these things that Kahneman does in like thinking fast and slow, you can see. And there was a kind of a crisis with the economists. And they said, well, how are we going to manage all these people? Because all our models, there's no model for being a dipshit. So what they eventually came down to is it doesn't matter if they are actually irrational. If we, the proles, are irrational, it doesn't really matter as long as we are can be controlled by operant conditioning. So then you can go back to Wiener and the cybernauts and that there's not the cybernauts, the cyberneticists, and you can say if these guys can be controlled and micro-controlled, which is what they're going to do with all these impact tokens and stuff, you can be operant conditioned. So although we're too dumb to make the optimal decisions, left brain style, we can be given incentives and nudges and stuff so they can do the thinking for us, because monkey see, monkey do, and they just give us a little bit of a reward, and so we can control. So if they can micro-control us, they can make us behave like econs, and if they behave like econs, then the models work. And so that's where we're at now. This is the world that's coming. Now, what I showed this guy is something which he fucking hated this, because he knew I was right. And I think that kind of ended our relationship, because he saw that I was right. But what I showed him in models and things like this on a computer is, okay, let's go back to the thing that I showed him. Imagine the field of flowers, all random sizes. You have a bee. The bee is going to go from flower to flower. The bigger the payoff is for the bee is the flowers are just consumed. The bee is the rational agent, and then, or the agent. And then you say, is this a rational, irrational agent, and which is the optimal path? So then you have a strategy. So then I show him this professor guy, and I said, okay, what's the rational strategy? And he said, it's an optimal strategy. So the bee would then start somewhere in the field of flowers, It would look at each one of the closest flowers, say which is the best cost benefit, and then basically go to that flower first, and then do the next cost benefit, best cost benefit, and go like that. I said, okay, that's the rational strategy. I went to my wife, who was, hope she's not listening, and went and so basically took her as the irrational model. Just saying that basically she didn't go for rationality in any big way. And so basically I took her the right, and I said, what would you do as a strategy in the beginning? She said, I just go to the closest flower and just go to the next closest one. And so I said to him, that's my wife's strategy. He said, yeah, that's the irrational strategy. That's why these people need to be controlled, because they won't do suboptimal. I said, watch this. You run the whole thing. So basically, if the bee consumes the flower and it disappears, the field of flowers are becoming diminishing and diminishing. So if you show it on a curve, the bee starts off being rational and has higher utility. So basically, they get a high return for the rational strategy. As they go, the trade-off goes down and down and down. My wife's strategy, at first, it doesn't pay off very well, but ultimately it pays off much better overall. The reason is that when the field gets very sparse, when there are few flowers left, because the bee's done the rational strategy, taking all the basically think of it as the low-hanging fruit. The rational strategy would take out the low-hanging fruit and work its way up in order to the least cost-beneficial fruit. So when you get to the last of the fruit, picking up the last of the fruit is so expensive in the distance that the bee has to fly that it always winds up paying heavily in the last few flowers. Whereas my wife's strategy just goes nibbling, and eventually it is more efficient because the path length, ultimately, you just go to the next flower. You don't care how big it is, you don't optimize it, you just go to the next one. It actually works out better. So the irrational strategy actually defeats the efficiency of the rational one. He fucking hated it.
Yeah,
he fucking did his nut. And the reason is he knew I was right. And so he couldn't find any reason why I was wrong. And it basically blew out all academia and the thinking in economics for decades, since the war. It blew it all out of the war. It blew his career, his professor emeritus status and everything. He was, didn't have the Nobel Prize, but he was one of the premier decision theorists, and I blew his career out the water. He realized that pursuing rationality, his whole life, you're talking, this guy is kind of in his 70s, and his whole life has been a lie, and I just showed it to him. He almost fucking wet himself. And the reason is all these guys are liars. They're not running the suit. The rational strategy is the most expensive when you run it to completion, and we're going to prove it on a global scale. But you can't. You see, I can't go to these guys and say, "Hey, I'm going to write a paper saying you're all a bunch of dickheads," because they will all lose their shit like he did.
And they'll move the goalpost.
Is decision theory, is the goal maximization or optimization?
The decision theory is making the best utility decision. So it's basically, you have to think of it as the biggest payoff. It's really from game
return
theory.
on investment. Okay. Yeah.
So if you're given a number of options and you have a number of goals or values, then you say which one gives you the best return on your goal. So think of it as an investment strategy, and then you would have a rational investment strategy. But you see, if there again, there's another body of evidence that shows that if you do rational investment strategies, they are suboptimal. All the brokers and investors do worse than a chimp, because a chimp is just doing irrational and just basically throwing darts at stocks. A chimp will do better than these guys that follow a rational strategy. It's shown.
And doesn't it depend also, like you said, on the amount of time? Like it's the frame of the time frame, If
that's the problem.
When do you run? When is completion? When is completion of the problem?
That's a great insight. What you have there is the nub of it, the absolute kernel of it. You've nailed it. It's what size the frame is. You see, in my model with the bee, I have the field, and it's clearly defined where the end of the game is, because when all the flowers are exhausted. So artificially, in that game, which is in a rectangular field, which is straight alien cortex, already you have a clearly defined end. The problem with all of these things is they don't have a clearly defined end. Where you say the game begins and ends is arbitrary. So if you go back to Solly and me playing in the, watching sports in school, is where do you have the frame? Do you say the frame is at the end of this game, which are the two, this one afternoon game, or do you say this is the entire season? Is that your frame? Because then the other school won. If it's just this game today, then we won. If it's the whole season, we win. Is it the last 10 years? Is that our frame? Because then somebody else wins. Now, in one of my videos, I did this thing which I'm surprised nobody asked about, because there's a hell of a lot in it. But I showed this game of Rochambeau. It's in one of these things where I was talking about.
I remember this. Yeah, and then in those videos you're talking of, and then it led up to like Theseus and the rat, and how our alien cortex and frame moving is a neurosis. Yeah, and all the wars and stuff. Yes, I totally understood that.
Yeah, gold star for you. So I got a spreadsheet, and I put a Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Right? And so I show what is a random sequence. I wondered why nobody challenged me on this, because you've got to wonder how I did this, and I'm not going to tell you how I derived it. But it's a random sequence. So rock, player A plays rock. This player, and then they're random. But they crypto-random. Because what I show in the thing is that if you say, well, you make a frame just one. You say, okay, we'll just play every round with the frame. And then you say, okay, player A plays paper, player B plays rock, player A wins. So that's one frame. Then you show that, run that through 52 rounds, and player A wins. Now you take exactly the same play, exactly the same results, and you say now you have a frame of two. So then you say player A plays, player B plays, player A plays, player B plays, and you take those two together and you say, oh, no, it's the opposite now. Now player B wins. Now you say 3 frames. And I showed it all the way till you have 25 and 25, and they oscillate. So I say 2 frames, player A wins. 3 frames, player B wins. 4 frames, player A wins. 5 frames, player B wins. And they go all the way through. And you say, it's just how you frame it. So why this is important is the story from China, where it's called Perhaps, is what the story is normally called. I think it's from maybe Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, or something like that. But anyway, how the story goes is that this it's in ancient China, and this a guy, kind of a wise sage, and his son catches a horse. He manages to find a horse in the wild and catches it. And then all the villagers say, "You're so damn lucky! You just got a horse for free." And the wise sage says, "Perhaps." Then the son is breaking the horse, and actually, TB, do you mind just muting?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So then he's playing the so then he's taming the horse. His son is taming the horse. He falls from the horse and breaks his arm. And all the villagers say, "Oh, you poor bastard, that's such rotten luck. Oh, you really lost out there." And the wise man says, "Perhaps." And then while the son's arm is healing, the local warlord comes around, sends basically the recruiter or whatever, the assessor, comes and marshals all the young boys, his son's age, for war. But his son doesn't get chosen because he has a broken arm. And the villagers say, "You're so fucking lucky. You won out there because your son didn't go to war just because he had a broken arm." And the wise man just says, perhaps. You see, what the story is about is you never know when to end the game. You see, the game is endless. So there's never a chance to say a win. But we declare a win. You see, this is what we're about to do with, say impact tokens or measured outcomes like they did in the UK under Blair and stuff. And say it's evidence-based, it's metrics, and say, and the first thing you got to say, okay, over what frame? Well, if you choose a quarter, you're going to get a very different result. If you assess, say, performance of a doctor or hospital or on some kind of metric goals, you're going to have to say, over what frame? So if you make it over a quarter, you're going to get quite a different result. Because if you get a disease that takes 6 months, you'll know that they'll push some guy's treatment into the next quarter because they can show a better result for this quarter. So in pursuit of that quarterly goal, you're going to get an entirely different result for some guys that have 6 months treatment or something. Now, if you get the same amount of patients and you say, okay, no, it's a 6 months goal, a half yearly goal. Well, now the guys have to be treated because they know he's going to die in 6 months. So you can't push his treatment out of the window. So then basically you have a different result and they'll pursue it in a different way. They'll sacrifice all the guys with ingrown toenails and guys that have long-term effects like cancer or something, 5-year effects. Then they'll all sacrifice those guys so they can meet their 6 months goal. So then okay, it's a yearly goal. And you carry on like that. You say, like, what makes sense? Well, you can say, well, the only thing that would be fair and humanitarian is that you have a lifetime goal. So that basically when you die, anybody that dies, then they would look at the healthcare system and say, was Hugh, who died at 75, or no, much sooner than that, at this rate, and then say, you'd say, look over the entire life, was the healthcare system good? And it's only worth doing it over a lifetime, but then you still got a problem because lifetimes overlap. So you might get one generation would be good, and then basically if you've got a population bottleneck, they'd favor the bigger, fatter part of the population. You can see that it's the frame that you measure it in is the result you get, which is one of the reasons why you can't do it. Because whatever time horizon you give or frame, and so frame is not only dimensioned by time. You have to frame it in a lot of ways. You have to frame the goals, which are coarse-grained. You have to do this kind of tiering in so many ways till eventually, look, take the insurance industry. The insurance industry, the insurance companies collude, so they don't really compete with each other. But okay, let's pretend they were legally they weren't all crooks and did actually compete. What insurance is all about, if they really do competition, is tiering. Now, what tiering is say you're going to insure automobiles. You got to put people in categories. Say you look at all the actuarial statistics and you say, well, there are these 3 clumps. Young people, they're reckless, they've got to have a high premium. People that are past college age, they're responsible, they have, basically lower premiums. And then the premiums go up when people get old and they start getting myopic and they have health problems. So then you have 3 tiers. Now, some other insurance company can come and say, oh, I can be much finer grained than you. I can say, if I look, say, in the middle tier, I can say, well, I can see this. I can see this correlation. I can say, black people are much better drivers than white people, let's say, to be politically correct. And then you'd say, so then I can say, I can make that tier much finer grained. I can say, I'll divide it into black people and white people on an ethnic basis. Then I can tier it differently. I can give the premiums cheaper to black people, and therefore I'll win the business. So anybody that can do the finest grain tier gets the business because they can be cheaper on average. So the smallest tier that you could give is the average driver. But if you take the metrics of the average driver, there are too many metrics. So they don't have actuarial statistics for, Mike. So the ideal would be that have actuarial statistics for Mike, but because there's only one Mike, they have to put you in a category. And so it's who could get the thinnest category. So now let's go back to they're making a decision, and it's who gets the business and thrives as an insurer is who gives the lowest premiums, and they can give the lowest premiums whoever gets the best tiering. In other words, the best frame. So whoever frames it the best, and then insurance is based. You could also slice it in time and say, I could give you a one-day insurance, and then I would completely change it. So if I can give insurance to Mike, very cheap insurance for one day, if I can know what you're doing tomorrow. See, if you say, no, I'm sick and I'm staying at home, ooh, motor insurance is going to be very cheap for you tomorrow. So but if you say over a year, you say, well, people are going to have, on average, it's going to average out over a year. So you see what I'm saying is whatever you do with the frames makes the result. Now, why this doesn't work goes back to the bee and the flowers and the rational. So it's suboptimal to just letting the system run. Then the reason is nature doesn't do that. Nature doesn't do tiering. Nature doesn't do set theory or frame analysis. It doesn't put things into brackets and frames like our left brain does. Our left brain does that to simplify things, just like an insurance company. But if you see, nature doesn't have to do that. Nature knows there's only one Mike. And basically, that's it. Nature runs Mike with full detail. Every last molecule of Mike, nature accounts for without any difficulty. But since we can't do that, then we categorize Mike, we put him in a frame, we try and categorize behavior and lifetime impacts, and that's the problem. And so if you do this on a massive scale, it's the fucking end of us because of the bee thing. It'll start out really good. You will show, see what's so dangerous about these arseholes is One Health and all these guys, they will show the impact. Everybody will love it because they'll say, look, crime's gone down. This is great. Less children. You will have a Steven Pinker, and measure after measure, things are getting better and better. Why? Because you're measuring literacy, you ass. You're not measuring happiness or longevity. So it becomes like there's a forest in Germany. They've tried. It's forest management is a good metaphor. So in Germany, there's a forest where they managed rationally. They said, we want best productivity out of this forest. So they got, here you get the spruce, and you say they did all the analysis. The spruce grows best in, soil with this pH. And then you get the pine, and you'd say that grows best in this pH. So then they only planted pine and spruce in that perfect soil, so they got the most growth. And that was going great, because look at the productivity of the forest. Everything's good. After 100 years, it took 100 years, and it's fucked. The forest is dead now. The reason is, over 100 years, they didn't know that the spruce and the pine are talking to each other. You can't segregate them with apartheid. They talk to each other. They're symbiotes. They talk in mycelium under the things. They're feeding off each other. They're communicating. They realize now. And so then what happened is the pine trees leached out the soil. The soil wasn't renewed properly because basically it wasn't the right category or tiering for the microbiotes in the soil. And so then all the bugs and pests, exploded and took all the things down, and now it's a wreck. But it took them 100 years to find that out. And for the first 50, they were making out like bandits. It was Steven Pinker going, well, measure after measure, forests are getting better and better. Then the utility goes and craters at the end. Then Steven Pinker's fucking dead, and his descendants are left with, thanks, you asshole. Now we just lost the forest because the utility tails off at the end. The bee in the final, catching the final flowers is where all the expense is. You pay for having all the low-hanging fruit. Later, you pay exponentially because nothing will work after that. So yeah, do I paint a picture of how much danger we're in?
Yeah, so basically what it is these managers have this frame that they're trying to fit everything in, and what they're going to do is pull out gun, sword, industrial technology, and shunt off the rest of the world that doesn't fit in that frame.
Yeah.
And that includes, wild animals, people that don't want to conform, the oceans especially. Yeah.
Yeah, it's eugenics, because it's exactly as you say. It's from this was the warning that the ancient Greeks gave us. They don't teach this shit in school, and that's why we're so fucked. But if they taught proper education to kids, they would know about Procrustes. And the reason why Procrustes cuts off people, you know the story, lops off the people so that they fit precisely in the bed, is they were warning you about this. Is they will, you see, first they will start making the frames for the people. That very quickly will forcing the people into the frames. So once they have the categories and they have like tiering for insurance, you see, for insurances don't get to shape their customers. But imagine if they did, is once they got all their perfect tiers, it's far better to go and do Procrustes and start eliminating guys and say like, well, you don't fit into this frame because, you, according to actuarial statistics, you've got a few red flags. You're an alcoholic. You're and have a bad ethnic background.
You eat donuts.
You eat donuts. And then, Procrustes, Procrustes. Basically, look up the story of Procrustes and Theseus. And so then it's very easy for them to say, well, that doesn't fit. That's an anomaly. So we will just shave that off. So we'll get your alcoholism, and you'll say, well, that doesn't fit in the frame. So let's fix your alcoholism. You've got a few bad genes here. We'll do, personalized therapy to handle that. And then you fit nicely into this little category, and we're off to the races. You're happy, and the system's running efficiently.
Yeah, it's Gattaca. Yeah, Gattaca. Remember that one?
Yeah, it's Gattaca. Yeah. So you see how these all fit together, that these short-sighted myopes don't see, is that it all works beautifully in the short term. You do the gene therapies and everybody loves them. Oh, you've got personalized medicine. You know what personalized medicine means? Is they decide what's pathological. So your creativity might become expensive for them. Better to just, if they can find, say, hey, we just actually give this gene therapy. We have the gene for whatever you liked. It was like, well, too bad you used to masturbate too much. We found the gene for masturbation. We're just going to knock that out so you have more time in the workspace. Great. Now you're happier. It's bloody Clockwork Orange. So, so they're going to do this all the way down. Now, here's another reason why this is all terribly dangerous, because this is eugenics. This is flat out eugenics. If you read a book on eugenics, they say, oh, eugenics ended in 1945 because everybody was so horrified by what the Nazis did. No, it went underground in 1945. I'll show you all the strands. They carried on underground. Even guys like Lindbergh and stuff like that. Lindy was a closet Nazi. He carried on after the war with eugenics. He ran a eugenics program into the 60s with his private money in secret. And all of these guys are doing it. They just realized that the population wasn't going to stomach. They just realized that the Nazis has overcooked it. So what they learned from World War II is that you can't do it the way the Nazis did it. But they didn't abandon eugenics. They just put it underground. And what has emerged as is all this, it's all for your health, and it's all for you, and it's all for the health of the system. But it's dark underneath. And this is where it's really, really dark. Ultimately, the problem with eugenics is it makes the population very, very vulnerable. So the lesson from nature is nature's diverse. Nature's strategy is diversity. Nature has an infinite way. Life finds a way, and there's huge diversity, huge options to pick from. Now, what eugenicists are doing is they're doing what, in essence, cattle breeders do, or dog breeders. They're doing line breeding. They're making the population homogeneous. It's one size fits all. It makes sure that everybody fits in a nice little category. Well, it's the same as what happens when you get a monocrop, like potatoes in Ireland. Then they're subject to blight. So they will be overrun by a superbug or something. And you say, like, well, pity we lost all that genetic diversity, because if we had a bit of diversity, we'd have some guys that could squeak through. But it means that all your eggs are in one basket. So when you meet some superbug and they go, we can't get the gene therapies to work, we're banging out these RNA therapies and we're testing them like crazy, these messenger RNA therapies, and we're testing them like crazy, but we can't keep up with the superbug. It's really unfortunate, because everybody's now exactly the same one generic type. You say, well, that's it. Humans are a monoculture. In a monoculture, they're monogenetic, no diversity, gone.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me. I can't remember what. I'll try to find the video and put it on XRMed. But it was about the Son Bushmen, and what they said was, out of all the Kalahari people that are left, they have more genetic diversity than the entire West. Yep.
Oh yeah, that is so cool. Yeah. You see, if you look at those indigenous people, they often hostile to white people and traders, because if a group is hostile to outsiders, it generally means they've been exposed to slave traders. It means that they have some negative experience with outsiders. But if they're not exposed to slave traders, and they're not many, by the way, so people like Inuits, they're very, very friendly to outsiders. And the reason is genetic diversity. So it always amazed the first explorers, say in the Canadian North, is, it soon got around to all the explorers that, hey, you go up there and they give you all their women. You go to an Inuit camp or something. They in the 1700s or the 18th century, it quickly got out to European explorers. Say, like, this is amazing. You go up there, they're so pleased to see you. They'll give you a woman for the night, and it's true in many cultures, even in Japan. The geishas and stuff is they, as a token of friendship, they would, token of hospitality, the woman would sleep with strangers. But what it's for is genetic diversity. Is because if you have a small founder population and a very stable population, you need genetic diversity. So that's why most indigenous people are very accommodating. But it's a bit sad all around, isn't it? That got lost when they started meeting slave traders.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, okay. So maybe we should end it off there. But the basic thing I hope I got across is a couple of things. Is don't commit suicide. Make them kill you. Just be bloody minded. Say, okay, I've got nothing. I'm just going to sit in the sun until I die. But I'm not killing myself. So the world has to kill me.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of my friends, that have been going through hell in this COVID pandemic. They've been saying, like, I'm going to live out of spite, and I'm going to spite them, meaning the ruling class. Yeah, so, like, I'm going to spite them. And I'm like, dude, that is so cool. That's a good way to think.
That's it. You've got to.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm like...
Your last act of defiance is to say, I'm not committing myself. I'm not committing suicide. Go fuck yourself. Yeah. You have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've sort of incorporated in that, because I've stolen, luckily I only have to work part-time, so I'm doing art, and they don't want their proles doing art. So it's like, yeah, do art out of spite. It's like, fuck you. Yeah.
So one more story before we go is Rommel. When I was a kid, Rommel was one of the guys I studied closely to try and understand. And I was always amazed because Rommel was implicated. Rommel saw the writing on the wall and knew that, it was over for Hitler. So he got involved in that plot, the assassination plot against Hitler. And Hitler escaped. It was the bomb in the Wolf's Lair. And so the guys came to Rommel. They recalled him to Berlin, and they put him in a car, and they said to him, like, here's a vial of poison, and maybe a revolver too. But they gave him the vial of poison, and they said, here, take this, and you will get an honorable funeral. And because he was a war hero. And they said, you take this, commit suicide, and we will, look after your wife and kids, and you'll get a state funeral and die with honor. And so he did. He was a good soldier. But as a kid, I wondered about it. I really thought, in my fantasy of like trying to think myself into Roman, I would have said, I would have got the revolver and just like said, look, dudes, you're taking a bullet. And I would have popped a bullet in each one of the guys who were sent, the mission to get me to commit suicide. But if I was him, I wouldn't have committed suicide. It would have said the last act of defiance is to say, no, you're assholes. You're such assholes. You have to kill a war hero. And basically said, like, if you, it would have really put the guys in a spot. It would have put Hitler in a spot. Because if Rommel didn't kill himself, Hitler would have been in serious trouble.
Yeah, I think it's that he's still probably identified with the system and the oppressor. It's like, they were talking about, I think Derek Jensen's something about decolonize your heart and mind. Yeah, so he probably still had, he probably actually felt guilty for going against the system. It's like, no, wash your hands of that guilt.
Yeah, I think that was it. That's the interpretation I came to, and said that he was still loyal to the system. So he did the loyal thing. But I think that was so wrong. I mean, it's one of those points in history where an individual decision could make such a huge impact on so many people. And I just wonder what, if he hadn't committed suicide, it would have been a real problem for Hitler, and I think it would have been benefited everybody. But he didn't do it because he was loyal to the system, like you said. But anyway, I think of that as, don't do a Rommel. Don't go down with the system. Your final defiance must be in, take out the last bastard, and they must kill you. Don't use a bullet on yourself. That's Desiderata number 8. Is just make your death their problem. If it comes down to the wire, and this is the end of your story, make your death their problem. You don't put on a suicide belt. Don't shoot yourself through the head. Don't take the poison they offer you. Is basically, you must make them do it, and that's problematic for them. And so it's yeah.
My view is like, a wolf doesn't commit suicide.
Yeah, this is okay. Jesus, now you made me do another story. So Everett, when he was talking to the Piraha, I told you that story in one of my videos, where he's a missionary, a Christian missionary. He does witnessing to tell the Piraha about his Christian conversion, in hoping that they can sympathize and that'll convert them. And the story he tells is how his stepmother committed suicide, and that made him a Christian. And the Piraha burst out laughing. And he said, why are you laughing? And they said, well, Piraha don't kill themselves. And I'll leave that as the last story. Think about that.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good.
After that, that was the moment that Everett dropped Christianity. So he's a missionary that goes out to the Amazon, and his witnessing was, my stepmother committed suicide. And he's like, we don't commit suicide. Suddenly the light bulb went off. We're the sick ones, aren't we? Yeah.
Yep. Now I won't All right, I won't monkey brain you anymore into telling more stories.
Okay. Okay, well then let's just pause and then go out. Just give up everything that we did in this, and just give it up to the universe. No attachments. Just fall still. Om Paramatma Namaha. Well, have a good week, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Have a good week.
You too. Be safe
Well
out there,
Thank
everyone.
you. Stay cool.
Be
It's hot
safe.
in New York City. It's 90
Yeah, it's
degrees.
hot here
It's
too.
90
It's over
degrees.
30 degrees. Yeah.
Take
All
care
right.
and thank you.
You too.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.